the Episcopal priest here at the Church of the Good Shepherd. And on behalf of all of us in our community, we want to welcome you here and thank you for taking time out of your schedule to be with us as we continue on our journey of educating ourselves around LGBTQ plus issues. Our first panel that we had was a presentation on the history of the multi-millennial history of the LGBTQ plus community. The second one was on legal issues, a presentation of folks from the community who are politicians and Democrats, Republicans, and also judges, helping us understand that. And tonight we have panelists representing their own experience. And I know on behalf of everyone in our community and everyone in attendance, we want to thank the panelists for being here and for helping us to learn more and to grow. I want to just briefly share one thing that we say when we are baptizing someone. We ask them a series of questions. Now, this isn't for the children. This is for the folks that are witnessing the baptism. And we will ask, will you seek and serve Christ in all persons, loving your neighbor as yourself? And the people respond, we will with God's help. Will you strive for justice and peace among all people and respect the dignity of every human being? And the answer is, I will with God's help. And so we in the Episcopal Church seek to follow that by ever broadening our mind and heart to be more open to all people who reflect, collectively, all of us for reflecting the image of God. And so this evening we hope and we trust that this will be a wonderful experience. So again, thank you for joining us. And if you're looking for a community to join, please consider us. We have wonderful services at 8 and 10. Without further ado, here's Julia, who will be leading our night. Julia?
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. Now, before we get started on the presentations, I'd like to explain kind of how this seminar is going to work. So first, every speaker is going to tell their story for 5 to 10 minutes. And after those presentations are over, I welcome you to put questions in the chat for everyone or for a specific speaker. Feel free to direct them straight to us, Megan Whalen, or to everybody in general. It's absolutely your choice. We also have some pre-submitted questions that we're going to go through. So essentially, that's how things are going to work. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce the first speaker, Michael Spiller. She is a registered nurse, and Mikey and her wife have been together for 22 years and married for 5 years. They have 3 boys, all of whom were adopted through the foster care system. She came out at the age of 20 when she told her mom. Her mom said, Mikey, I knew when you were 5. So welcome, Mikey. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I am very honored to be a part of this. I am truly humbled and hopeful by what you're trying to accomplish here. This is, in my opinion, groundbreaking. I've always looked to my elders in the community for what they have done, and I'm inspired to see someone younger doing something for the community. I came out when I was 20, and I had kind of a varied background, but I came out when I was 20, and I met my wife when I was 23. So we've been together for 22 years. Of course, as with anything, you have your ups and downs. My wife is very much Catholic, raised in a Catholic household, and that presented unique issues. We adopted 3 boys through the foster care system. And honestly, I was very blessed to have so many people supporting me, Hal, Lori, the Kennedys, and as a whole. But that's not to say that there weren't adversities. As with anything, you go into small-minded communities, and I've had people ask me, whose kids are they when we're walking with our boys, or I've had actually friends in the community not feel like we were living up to their standards of how we should be presenting ourselves as lesbians, because we didn't want to go to the women's march in our community, but with having 3 small boys who can read, and then going into a march where women are wearing suggestive headpieces and having signs that have lewd or vulgar writing on them, and then having to explain that to my boys, I didn't feel like that was the right genre for them, or the right arena for them. What we feel, because all of our boys go to Catholic school, we've just made it a point to live our lives like anyone would live their life. And, as we meet people along the way, help them to see that we are very much like everybody else. And, we, in fact, one of my boys was teasing my oldest was teasing one of the younger ones about a girl at school who likes them. And then my son, Michael, just burst out and said, "You're gay." It's like, yeah. And so he's 7. And so we're not, just kind of popped out of his mouth. And I just kind of laughed about it. And I was like, "Yes, we are." And he's like, I said, "Do you have any questions?" He's like, "No, just you're gay." And so we were like, okay. And I remember when my oldest was 5, he said, "Why don't I have a dad?" And my answer, I thought about it for a couple of minutes, and I said, "Well, if you had a dad, then you wouldn't have 2 moms." And he in turn thought about it for a minute and said, "I'm glad I don't have a dad." So he, we've answer any questions that they may have, and teach our boys to do what's right, be loving and, accepting of others, and, just be good gentlemen. So that's, I could give you a bunch of different topics or stories, but if you have any questions, feel free to ask. That's more or less how things have gone for me. I am honored to be here. Thank you.
Maybe, Ms. Mikey, you could share kind of one story in detail that you think might be kind of relevant, if you could. Thank you.
Well, for instance, we were on vacation and we went to Branson, Missouri, and we're traveling with our boys like we often do. And some random stranger felt the need to ask, we're in an elevator, "Well, whose kids are they?" And that caught us all by surprise. And especially that he would ask that in front of our children, who don't, they do all know that they're adopted, but it was just such an odd question. And, of course our response was, "Well, they're ours." So we have had to deal with things like that. And I know that my children, my oldest especially, has told me that sometimes he gets teased at school, not as much as I would have thought, honestly, but, every now and then somebody will tease him or, say derogatory comments about us. And he, to his credit, tries not to tell us about it because he doesn't want to hurt our feelings. But if it really bothers him, then he lets us know, and we usually just try to talk our way through it and, explain it would be, if it wasn't that we were gay, it would probably be something else. Sometimes children could be cruel, and, we just have to be the bigger people and have an open mind, turn the other cheek.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ms. Mikey. Christine, if you have a question for Mikey, we're going to hold the questions to the end. Could you put it in the chat for me, and we'll address it to Ms. Mikey at the end. Thank you, Christine. Yes.
Julia, you're muted.
Shoot, I'm so sorry. Okay. The next speaker is going to be Remy Paulet, who lives in Yorktown Heights and is a sophomore at Skidmore College, majoring in psychology and gender studies. He has worked with the LGBT plus community since he came out 11 years old as part of the community, and has volunteered with Center Lane and currently volunteers with Yorktown High School to educate the freshman class every semester on LGBT plus issues. And it's actually pretty cool because when I first met Remy, he was speaking to my class in the school. So thank you, Remy. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, so basically, I, to my knowledge, am the only trans person in this space right now, and that has been sort of the story of my life. I came out as knowing that I wasn't a girl when I was 11 or 12 to some close friends, and I have known for a lot longer, mainly like the second that puberty started. I started to realize that something didn't feel quite right, realizing that like the way that my body was changing was not correct to the way that my like brain associated with myself. I grew up in a very accepting family. I grew up, you know, my family has always been accepting of the LGBT community. It's always going to be a little different when it's your kid because it's an adjustment. It's new. When you expect something from your kid and then they grow up to be a little different than you had like anticipated. But I am overall count myself very lucky. My experiences in high school were not the same as that, unfortunately. I grew up, you know, I came out in high school in 10th grade to the administration, and I never officially told my my classmates, but they all found out through the grapevine and things like that, which is how I had planned on it happening. But I did have a lot of issues, and it was not nearly as comfortable as I had hoped, or as you would expect, maybe. I ran into quite a few issues with other students and had, yeah, I was bullied, to put it bluntly. And I was kindly asked by one of the health teachers, Miss Siliberto, to go in once every semester and talk about being trans and talk about these things so that I can hopefully try to avoid the same thing happening to other people, because I was the only out trans person in my entire high school while I was there. But once I left, there are a lot more, mainly because of the fact that once COVID hit and people started to kind of live in their own spaces and think about who they were outside of social contexts and think about what they felt was right for them outside of everyone else, people started to realize that they maybe weren't as socially like conforming as they thought they were initially. Yeah, I don't know. I guess that's like a brief rundown. I am now a sophomore in college, as mentioned, and I'm in a much better space and surrounded by LGBT folks all the time. I live on an LGBT specific floor in my school, and yeah, I guess that's basic rundown. I'm sure that there's probably like a lot of people may not be super understanding of like, they might not know a whole lot about what it means to be trans, and I'm happy to answer any sort of questions regarding that if anyone has any.
Thank you, Remy. I asked the same thing of Miss Mikey. Perhaps you could share kind of a story that comes to mind that you think might be relevant, perhaps about your coming out experience, or basically anything that you can kind of think of.
Let's see. I'm going to try to go for a more positive one just to kind of keep the mood up. I don't know if I have any specific stories. I guess that the one that I like telling the most is before I came out as trans, before I realized that I wasn't a girl, I identified as a lesbian. Because I at the time, it was just the only word that I had available to me that felt like a way to say that I didn't quite feel like I was being perceived by the world correctly, but I knew it wasn't right yet, but that was just what I used. And when I came out to my family, my extended family at a dinner table, I kind of like, it was a lot of people, like 12 of us. And I sat down and my mom said, okay, everyone, Remy has an announcement. And everyone got quiet. And I said, I'm a lesbian. And my aunt just said, that's great. And I thought that that was a very sweet moment that I really like sharing, because I think it exemplifies, like, I'm very lucky. My family is very, very good.
Thank you, Remy. Thank you. That's nice.
And just so the speakers know, we're getting questions pouring in, so we're going to have a very lively Q&A after. All
Yes.
very interesting, good questions. But let's keep rolling with the presentation.
Okay, our next speaker is going to be Mr. Shaquille Barksdale, who is a cisgendered gay mathematics teacher at Ramapo High School in Spring Valley, New York. Shaq has been a board member with GLSEN Lower Hudson Valley since 2017. Shaq has been a resident of the Hudson Valley for over 20 years and has participated in many Pride-related events all across the region. And he has chaired youth groups and GSAs and advocates for students every day. Thank you, Shaq.
Thank you for the introduction, Julia. Thank you, Mikey and Remy, for leading and bringing the panel together. A strong start. So Julia pretty much gave everybody my bio. My name is Shaquille Barksdale. My pronouns are he, him, his. I currently teach high schoolers, Algebra 1, and the East Ramapo School District in Rockland County. Prior to that, I worked at a middle school in New Rochelle. I also didn't include my coming out story, so I thought that was interesting. So I probably should say a little something about that. I've been out of the closet since I was 15 to my parents. Interestingly enough, my father took it a little bit better than my mom did. And, you know, she struggled with it initially, but these days I catch her watching RuPaul's Drag Race in her room silently. So, you know, she's come a long way. So I would consider her an ally now. When I was in high school, I must say I kind of was a little lucky in the sense that I never really experienced bullying for being who I was, and not that much adversity. And I had a good group of friends who accepted me and who I fit in with. I did theater in high school, so the theater kids are always like some of the most welcoming kids in the school building. My teachers were fine, and I guess kind of having that supportive family made it a little easier. But when I became a teacher, that's kind of something that I have to navigate on my own, like working with other professionals who may not, you know, be like me or who are different from me. And so I find that a little challenging to navigate to this day. But you know, it kind of starts with the staff, and you know, people notice and people have questions, and they come up as honest adults and they ask me, and you know, I'm out of the closet, so I have no qualms about saying, yeah, I'm a gay male, and so on and so forth. But with the students, it's a little different because we all know, as Mikey said, kids can be terrible. They could say really mean things. And so that's a dance I always find a little tricky to do with kids. And I feel that my students know, because it's, for me, it's more about like that grapevine method that Remy talked about, like for students, because you don't want, you know, something to happen in class, then kids run out, and then all of a sudden it's the talk of the school building, and now all of a sudden, you know, it draws controversy to you as a staff member. So we want to try it, like, at least my goal is to limit the way kids respond. I do have trans students in my classes, so I find that that helps. I brought in bracelets, rainbow bracelets for students, so kids kind of see the hints there. And you know, I think tentatively my plan is in June to maybe come out to the students, but I find that they are accepting, because I find my trans students to almost kind of be an inspiration for me about like how their peers will react to who I am as a person, because they've been embraced. It's a trans boy, so went from a girl to a boy. And I find that he is very included in like his friend circles. His friends have accepted him very well. And so it shows to me that there are students who understand that there are people who are different in the world, because it takes all kinds of people to make a world. And so I find that my environment is not so hostile. I've had situations where in my current building, I've had fellow staff members, fellow queer staff members say, you know, okay, I know so-and-so is quite religious, so maybe you want to stay away from them. You know, they don't necessarily believe in same-sex marriage and equality and all that stuff. And so I've gotten warnings. I've also had senior teachers say, you know, maybe, you know, people are not a fan of the energy you bring to the building because it's different and people are not used to it. So I get constant reminders that I am different from people. And that's probably the challenging part of being a queer person and a queer person of color and going in different spaces. You always have to kind of like walk on eggshells to the people within the room, because you never know the level of acceptance you'll receive, and you don't want to be too out there or too flamboyant or too this or too that, because you do want to be accepted, but being queer is who I am, and being a person of color is who I am, and those are things I can't change. And so I do find it's a struggle to navigate daily, but you know, we all have allies, and the fact that you all came to this seminar and you're willing to learn and you have open ears, just know that you're already on the right path of being an ally or building a safe space or building a comforting environment for students who may not have the language to express themselves or identify themselves, or even fellow adults. And that's my story.
Thank you, Mr. Shack. Would you like to share a specific story that you thought might be nice to share with everybody, physically?
So I don't know if this is a positive or a negative, but I will share. Like I said, I do find inspiration from my students. And so when I worked at the middle school, I had a 7th grader who was a young Jamaican kid. And being that he comes from a Jamaican household, his parents weren't the most open-minded individuals, and they were actually kind of quite homophobic. But I did run our Open Doors Club, where these students came and they had a space to have conversations about different things. And one day that kid said, you know what, I'm gonna wear heels to school. Like, I already know what pair I want and everything. And like, that became his thing for a while. Like he would wear them all around school, and just to see the kids react and kind of adjust. And kids are naturally curious. And so one of the things I learned when it comes to educating kids on these issues is you only give them just enough. Like, they don't need a whole dissertation or explanation of what certain things are, but you give them enough just so that their curiosity is satisfied, but they also know a little more than they did before. And so I used to always be his biggest cheerleader, walking around the heels, like, oh, Travis, like, I'm so proud of you. You're living your best life, because it's not easy to be a youth, a middle schooler, and coming out and trying to be yourself, especially when you don't always have the language. So that's one experience I had as a teacher.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Now, so remember, everybody, put any questions in the chat if you think about them for individual speakers or kind of for everyone to answer and discuss together. Now, our next speaker is going to be Miss Maria O'Connell, who has lived in Yorktown Heights for the past 12 years and is married with 4 children. She manages one of the UPS franchises that she and her husband own, but her real passion is volunteering at school, PTA, and the Yorktown Athletic Club. Her first experience with the LGBTQ plus community was when her oldest son came out as transgender. I did that the first seminar too.
There we go. There we go. Sorry about that. Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Maria O'Connell. Thank you, Julia, for including me in this. I speak to you from a little bit different perspective. I am the parent of a transgender boy, and my experience with his coming out was definitely from a uneducated and perhaps ignorant perspective. It was very new to me. So I apologize if I offend or say something offensive to anyone, because I'm telling my story and how I learned and got to the place I am now, which is very far from where I was. And I'm quite proud of myself for the journey that I took, as well as my son, Adam. So it was 8 years ago in 2014 that we learned that my son was transgender. He told us by an email one early Sunday morning, and it totally and completely shocked us. We can't say that we ever saw signs. We can't say we ever saw this coming. He was and this is one of those things I always worry about offending. I can't think of my child as the opposite pronoun except what they were at the time. So to say he was a very girly girl, which is what I'm about to say, I feel more comfortable saying my daughter was a very girly girl. She dolls, princesses, it was very surprising to us to learn on that Sunday morning, very early via email, that he was actually identified as transgender as well as gay. My husband and I did not take it well. We struggled with it for many days before we could even look at him. And that was not a reaction I'm proud of now, 8 years later. Imagine how hard it was for him to tell us. And yet, it was also hard for me to hear it, to realize it. So from the perspective of a parent who, as Julia introduced me, is very involved in the community, I unfortunately thought, how is this going to affect me? What does this mean for me? At the time, I had an at-home daycare for the teachers in our community. And I kept thinking, who would want to send their child to my daycare when this is what happened to my child? How could I care for others? Was I going to lose the kids in my daycare? It shouldn't have been that way. It should not have been what was this meant for me. It should have been what was he going through and what was going to happen for him. I mentioned that it came from a place of ignorance and uneducated about LGBT community and what being transgender meant. I won't lie to you, that morning, very early Sunday morning, I read the email and read transgender, but I think I thought transvestite. I think I imagined his life, him living a dark alley kind of life. Somebody I didn't recognize or couldn't imagine being my child. So as days went by, 8 years ago, as Remy mentioned, it wasn't quite as accepting in Yorktown as it might be now. We didn't know anybody else who was transgender. There was nobody we could talk to or ask about it. And you all know what happens when you Google things. It's a really scary place sometimes. So we thankfully found a therapist who worked both with my son, Adam, and my husband and I in joint therapy sessions and got us started on a right path to understanding. We got into the Center Lane Transparent group, which if anybody has had any experience with it, was life-saving for us. And again, me thinking about me, drove into that parking lot thinking, what am I doing here? How I have nothing in common with these other parents. How am I going to sit through this meeting and hear about these parents and their children being transgender when I can't even accept that that's the path my child's taking? But when I walked in the room to my first transparency group meeting, there was a businessman there in a suit, a lawyer. There was a gentleman from Ireland, where my husband was born, Ireland, with the most Irish brogue I've ever heard in my life, besides my father-in-law. Strongest is the word I was looking for. There was people just like me, and their kids were transgender. And I really thought I was going to be walking into a firing squad. I don't know what I thought I was walking into, but I didn't think it was going to be a place where I felt so comfortable with the people around me, going through the same thing that I was about to start going through. So I was incredibly grateful to Center Lane for educating me and for helping me understand what my son was going through and what steps I needed to take in order to be a better parent for him. As I think it was Shaq who said it, Adam is a theater kid, so thank God his friends were very accepting. He came out to them before he came out to me. He also came out to a trusted teacher at school. And initially I was angry at that. How dare you tell somebody in that role before you told me? But then I realized that he needed to test it out. He needed to say the words to somebody who reminded him of his mother before he could say the words to me, and see how she reacted before he could say it to me. For me, that was so life-changing that I realized he was considering our feelings when he was going through his steps and his motions to come out. Julia, you're gonna have to cut me off because I could keep going. So Center Lane was life-saving for us. Adam was the first transgender student in Yorktown High School to come out while in high school. As a PTA president, as a school, involved in all the schools, again, I was worried about and very concerned about a lot of things at school, not just for me, but for him, his safety, his, the bullying, what bathroom he was going to be allowed to use, where he was going to be able to change for gym. The school was amazing. We had an incredible experience about that. And I'm sorry to hear that that didn't continue after Adam had graduated. Our experience with Yorktown High School was second to none. The principal had a meeting with not only all of Adam's teachers, but my younger son, who was a freshman at the time, so that everyone was on the same page. Everyone knew how to treat Adam. Everyone knew what Adam needed to feel safe and welcome at school. It was something that became, as time went on, such a huge priority for us to make sure that he had a safe and good experience, during school. But thankfully, he never had any issues with bullying or not being accepted. College visits were interesting. I learned to ask the right questions about transgender housing, about gender neutral bathrooms. Again, as a parent who couldn't wait for that first experience of going on college tours with my kids, it wasn't what I was expecting to have to ask. It wasn't something that was commonly seen. You didn't see the gender neutral bathrooms 7 years ago like you see now when I noticed them around town or at places. But overall, today I shared with you my story and how I learned to be a better parent for Adam and what he needed. He never changed. He was still the same person. That baby, that little girl that I had, is still there. He's just dresses different and uses a different name. But some people equate it, do you have to mourn the loss of your daughter? I still have that person. They just called a different name, and that's not a big deal, really. It's not. He's definitely living his best life. He's happier than I've ever seen him. He's successful. He graduated college in 2020. He has wonderful friends. He's just doing fantastically, and we're so proud of him. But the journey is hard, and the journey is different for everyone. But I think that's what makes it real. I think my turning point when I really accepted him was one day when we were in therapy together. And somehow it came up with, I was saying in therapy, you wore so much makeup. Your hair was always done and big and teased and dyed red or blonde or highlighted. If this is how you've been feeling, why were you so determined to fit into that feminine mold, that female mold? And Adam shared with me that he would stand in front of the mirror every morning and look at himself when he's getting dressed for school. And he didn't feel like he looked like a girl. So he'd put more makeup on, or he'd put, tease his hair up more, or more hairspray, or bows or flowers, so he can fit into that expected box of being a female and what he was supposed to look like. So I kept thinking, you wore so much makeup. Well, instead it was, I was trying to feel like a girl because that's what I was told I was, as opposed to I wasn't. That's not who I was. So that was probably the day that I said I was looking at it completely wrong, saying, he was pretending to be a girl for all those years, a girly girl. Definitely not who he was. So that was my experience with my, at the time, 16-year-old son, or transgender son, coming out to us, and now he's 24 and doing great.
Thank you so much, Miss Maria. Thank you. That was really great. Now on to our final speakers of the evening. It's going to be Rabbi Robbie and Ellen Weiner, who are residents of Yorktown and have lived there with their family for almost 20 years. Ellen was raised in Yorktown and attended the Yorktown School District from kindergarten to 12th grade. Rabbi Robbie Weiner is the spiritual leader of Temple Beth Am in Yorktown, and Ellen is a teacher in the Yorktown Central School District. Together, they have 3 children. Their youngest, who is currently in 8th grade, came out to them when he was in 4th grade, and they have always been extremely supportive of his journey.
I just want to begin by saying that I am incredibly inspired by everyone's stories that they've shared tonight. And as Maria just said, I think everyone's journey is different. And that's part of why it's so important for everyone to be able to share their stories, because the more that we speak with people and we hear all of the different experiences, it just helps us to have a better understanding of what people go through. A little bit about my own background, as was shared with you. I grew up here in Yorktown, so I can speak to how much Yorktown has changed through the years because I've been a lifelong resident here since about 1975. So Yorktown has certainly changed a lot through the years. And, it's been really interesting for me seeing my own children going through the Yorktown School District and knowing my own experiences, both having been a student there and being on the teaching side of it. When Joshua first came out to us in 4th grade, he was just so very casual about it. And we happen to have a little bit of a different background where we have a lot of close friends who have all different family backgrounds. We have friends who are together who are gay. We have friends who are together who are lesbians. We have just a whole variety of friendships that Joshua has always been exposed to. And he knew some teenagers through family friends that had come out years earlier. He knew some that were trans. So having all of these exposures, when Joshua first came up to us and told us when he was in 4th grade that he said, "Mom, Dad, I'm gay." And we said, okay, that's fine. And, it didn't mean anything to us. We just thought, all right, he's in 4th grade. Maybe he is, maybe he's not. Between us, we wondered a little bit, could he know this early? That we often hear about children coming out when they're older. So the questions that we had were, how much could he possibly be emulating what he's seeing from some of our family friends with their children and wanting to follow in those footsteps versus what is his inclination? So I think just being who I am, where I like to seek out information from friends I have and talking with people I know, I talked with some of my gay friends and I asked them, how old were you when you had your first crush on another boy? How did you know? And they shared with me how young they were, and I started to open up with some of them because at that point we weren't quite ready to share with the community, and we felt Joshua should share before we shared. It wasn't our place to tell his story. We needed to follow his lead. So initially, as we were gaining more knowledge from our friends, we felt the best thing that we could do is just support him here at home, let him know how loved he was, because that's all we felt. It was just, he's our boy. And all right, so you love another boy, that's fine. All we care about is that you find a love that is a healthy love and that you live a happy life. That's what's important to us, that you're a good person. And we want you to be loved the way we know we love each other. That's our goal for our children. We want our children to find someone the way we found each other. So Joshua came out at school. He shared with friends. It was hard in 4th grade for people to understand. Children at that age aren't thinking about sexuality yet. They're not understanding what it is. Sometimes Joshua was encouraged to, tone it down a little bit in the sense of not talk about it so much. Be who you're going to be, but don't talk about it so much because other kids aren't quite ready to hear it. And we just told Joshua that, let people ask you questions. You can answer those questions, but it was a delicate balance of trying not to rock the boat. And then in 5th grade, same sort of thing. He would let people know. And I think by 5th grade, he was in full flamboyant rainbow wear, where he was, head to toe wearing rainbow. And we had a daughter who was a senior in the high school at the time, getting ready to go off to college. And one of her gay friends said to Joshua, being gay is not your identity. I just want to let you know that. You don't need to always wear rainbow all the time. You be who you are, but you're going to find yourself. And it's interesting because now, years later, Joshua is no longer wearing the rainbows, and he himself kind of looks back and laughs about when he went through that stage. But it's been a roller coaster for the past few years. We've had incredibly supportive experiences, and we've had incredibly difficult and painful experiences. And I think the most important thing in all of it is us coming together as a family, being there to support Joshua, letting him know no matter what, that he is loved, and we're going to find whatever supports are necessary to help him with whatever challenges he faces. As Maria said, the issue in the locker room at the high school. For us, it was going to the middle school and what's going to happen changing in the middle school locker room, because Joshua had already been out for several years. And it actually did become an issue, and they had to move his locker to a separate area of the locker room so that he could be away from the other children, because it did become a problem. So it can be incredibly difficult. But I find, having lived in Yorktown, having grown up here, that he's also found some incredibly supportive friends. And I like to think that, as the years go on, each new generation, if you will, becomes more and more accepting. And so we try to focus on those positives. I don't want to take all the time. I want to make sure I leave time for Robbie to talk.
No, it's okay. I just wanted to, we decided that Ellen was going to talk about as the parent, and since some of you knew me before coming on, that I was the rabbi over at Temple Beth Am, and now all of you know. So I'm a clergy person, and some of you might be thinking, oh, what does a rabbi happen to think about this stuff? So I just want to quickly share for myself. I'm very similar to many of the more liberal rabbis that exist out there in the world, in that we're very supportive of the LGBTQ plus community across the board for many of the more liberal rabbis. For myself, the issue of the gay community has always been something that I've cared a lot about, because one of my first mentors was a rabbi who was gay, and he led me on my journey to helping me to understand and to be more understanding of others, and that definitely affected me, so much so that right when I became a rabbi, officially, I started doing commitment ceremonies, and once gay marriage became official, I started doing gay marriage. Anything that I could do to help support the community as a rabbi, that was sort of a part of my journey as a rabbi. So much so now in our own congregation, just as Julia's been saying about like mentioning stories, I have to state a fact, which is, I guess, a story, is that in our own youth group over at Temple Beth Am, I actually think we have more LGBTQ plus kids in our youth group than we have straight kids in our youth group. And there's about 15 kids that are involved in the program, and it's hilarious to me that like when I show up for our programs, it's like, oh, this is great. But we as a community, collectively, we put in our religious school newsletter and in the synagogue newsletters, we will put in a "We Are a Safe Space" with a rainbow background, letting whether it's our own congregation know, or whether it's anybody who happens to see something, see a piece of marketing come out, that they know that we are a safe space for anyone in the community. Additionally, we have been doing gay pride Sabbaths over the years as well. So we don't feel that it's enough just to say, oh, we subscribe to the Jewish understanding of everyone is made in God's image, and so therefore that's enough. We try to do active things in our community to help the LGBTQ plus community feel that this is a safe space, that they can come, they can worship, they can be a part of our community programs and our social programs, though we know that in the adult community, we're predominantly hetero. I mean, there's no question about it. But we want to try and go that extra step to make it a welcoming space. So that's us.
Thank you so much, you guys. Now, and thank you so much to all the speakers for sharing your stories and your experiences and your wisdom. I feel like we all really got something out of it. So thank you. And now we're going to move on to some questions. Now you guys can continuously put questions in the chat if you think of some more. And so we'll start with, this is a question directed straight to Miss Mikey. So it says, how do your children respond to questions put to them regarding your relationship? So you can.
That can be a tough one. I think that they respond differently depending on who is asking the question and the atmosphere in which it's asked. I don't know that anybody has asked the younger two, or if they have, they haven't said anything to us. I know that my oldest buddy has had to deal with it a couple of times, and he pretty much just takes those are my parents and that's what it is stance. I don't think he is, well, he's not overly, like, he's not overt about pretty much anything in his life. He's kind of a quiet kid. So he certainly doesn't advertise, but if they ask a question, I'm very, very proud that he has just answered them truthfully. And so to me, that shows that he has enough care and loves us and respects and understands, where we are, that he doesn't feel that he needs to hide. So, but pretty much he's the only one who's been asked so far.
Great, thank you. And then there's another question for you, Miss Mikey. It was, how has the Catholic school community accepted your family? Or if you've struggled with that, what has helped you and Nicole get to a space where this works for you?
We actually are on our second Catholic school. The first Catholic school was not as accepting. It was kind of fine when we were in pre-K and, you drop your kid off and you pick your kid up and nobody really saw us. But they were not as accepting in general. Now, the current school that we're in has been very, very accepting. We're room mothers. We, are at all the functions. So we are very blessed in the aspect that this particular Catholic school has been very welcoming for us. I know that that's not always the case, but we definitely are in the right place for us, which is good because Nicole is devout Catholic, and I don't know how that would have set with her if we had to move on.
Right, thank you. And now moving on to a question asked of Remy. So it says, in your experience, I read the wrong question first. So what made you trust your administration at school to come out? And so this person is an administrator and is trying to create a safe space for students to share with them. So they want to know what others are doing to help support the LGBTQ+ students.
So the question is asking why I trusted the administrators to come out, right? So honestly, the reason that I trusted them was because I had not heard anything previously like bad happen. I wouldn't necessarily say that my issues in Yorktown High School were because of the administrators doing anything, but more so what they didn't do, which was stop me from being bullied by the students and assist me in any sort of issues that I got in any sort of way. They, like, I had not heard any issues happen previously with anyone, so I felt comfortable enough to, and I had also met with Adam before I came out, and my mom had met with Maria, and we had heard their story, and although I'm happy to hear that they had a different experience than me in a good way, unfortunately that just isn't how things panned out for me.
Great, thank you. And another question for you, Remy, is what can people do who are meant to take care of LGBTQ plus kids in order to best be affirming and protective of them?
I think that it varies very much depending on the kid. But if you're talking like from the perspective of a parent, I think that the best thing that you can do for your kid is to just fiercely support them as much as possible. And I think that in your process of understanding like the difference of how, you know, like processing this new information that you're gaining when they come out, I think the best thing that you can do is process that on your own. And at least for what happened with me with my parents is that they kind of didn't inform me of the struggles that they were having with understanding me. And although they expressed interest in like education and things like that, they didn't express any sort of like struggle with it or hardship, because they knew that what I was going through was kind of enough for one 12-year-old kid to be dealing with. And they handled it on their own and didn't really like involve me in that. And I think that that was really helpful for me in not feeling like I was carrying too much, if that makes sense.
And like kind of, I think another kind of aspect of the question was, what do you think the principal, the administrators of the school could have done kind of to help you?
Yeah, I think that the administrators of the school could have absolutely come out and supported me more openly. I don't feel the need to talk specifically about my particular circumstance, the real big one that happened, but if this is a Yorktown High School administrator, they likely know what happened. And I think that things could have been stopped sooner, and they should have been stopped sooner, and I should not have had to beg for things for people to be like helping me as much as I was, and I shouldn't have had to go as far as I did to get any sort of assistance in the situation.
All right, thank you. And for Mr. Shack, a question that was submitted is earlier was, what is the most supportive action from people that you knew during your journey?
I think the most supportive part is just like when people declare themselves as allies, and like, you know, you don't feel so alone, because a lot of times as queer people, we are the only people in the room. And so when you have people who hear your story and say, what, you know, that's not right, you know, I think the world should be a better place for all people, and you know, who kind of express the equality, it kind of gives you that sigh of relief, like, okay, there's at least one person I can kind of like talk to and lean on and build this network of inclusivity with. Because if you have two people on your side, then, you know, you're starting to change the world a little bit. Maybe, you know, two people can make a better, more of a difference than one person. So, you know, like, I was talking with a friend recently, and I said that there are two kinds of allies, really. The ones that are kind of just, oh, well, yeah, you know, I don't really mind. And then there are the people who sign up to be an ally and who receive the posters and wear the rainbow flags and everything. And you don't have to be one or the other, but, you know, letting people know that you are an ally kind of like already builds a safe space in itself.
Oh, thank you. Now, a question for Maria is, here it says, thank you so much for your honesty and transparency. And what do you think was a particular turning point for you? And what would you recommend for other families to do to kind of get to that aha moment?
I spent a lot of time crying. I spent a lot of time reflecting, feeling sorry for myself, my family, the journey that we were going on. And I really, as silly as it sounds or as cliche as it sounds, I woke up one morning and said, I choose happy. Like, this is what it is. I would love to change it at the time. Now I wouldn't dream of changing it, but at the time, I dreamt of it, Adam telling me he was wrong and getting my little girl back. But I woke up one morning, and that's very typical of me, just deciding that that's it. I choose happy. I was going to live with it. It took my husband a lot longer to do that, but definitely for me, it was just a turning point. When I said in the story earlier, when I learned that every single day, Adam struggled to try and look like a girl. Every single day, he put more makeup on to try and look like a girl. And it never felt quite right. And I never saw those struggles. When he'd come down in the morning, sometimes I'd want to send him back up to wash his face, but I never saw the struggles. So I think that probably was the biggest turning point that I had for me.
Okay, thank you. And I'm not sure if you saw this because it was in the public chat, but who was the therapist that worked with you in that?
Oh, he was fabulous. His name is Dr. Elijah Neely. He is a trans man and transgender male, but he did since retire, I believe. But again, totally relatable for conservative parents, Irish Catholic, conservative, who really did not know how to deal with any of these things and didn't have the education to deal, the knowledge to deal with them. So I'm sorry he's not around to help more families.
Okay, thank you. And now we have 2 more questions that could perhaps be, if any of the speakers want to answer them, that they are more general about the community rather than about your experience. And they are, someone is wondering, why is a pride flag important, and why is it kind of important to display that when there is no kind of straight pride or straight flag?
Maybe Mr. Shack, because that's kind of like what you were talking about allies.
It's a visibility thing. Like you guys are always asking how to be a better ally. Like it's these little things that make you visible that people look and they'll ask questions. Like I have a coworker who's been in the building way longer than I have, who has like a big, huge, like the size of an American flag in a classroom. She has one of those and it's a rainbow flag. And I asked her about it and I said, are you maybe lesbian, bisexual or anything? And she was like, no, I'm just an ally. And like, I have it there for the kids because they come in and they ask questions and I have to explain like, no, this classroom is for everybody. Like, they ask what country does that flag represent, or, who's that for? Or are you so-and-so and so-and-so? And for that teacher in particular, the answer is no, I'm not an LGBTQ individual, but I am an ally. And so, all sorts of students and all sorts of people feel comfortable going to her and saying, what's going on with this? And just feeling comfortable around that person because they are visibly an ally. It's the visibility aspect that is important.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to add anything on that particular point? Any of the other speakers?
I wholeheartedly agree. Even if it's not from an ally standpoint, I can remember driving past Ochsner Hospital, and they had the pride flag flying with the other flags, and the overwhelming sense of relief that seeing that flag gave me, even though I had been out for 20 years, it still made me feel like it was a safe place, that it was that even if I'm not foolish enough to believe that everybody in that building was wholeheartedly on my side, but they at least thought enough to hang it, and I felt welcomed. I felt safe. I, as a nurse, have taken care of transgendered patients before who delayed getting treatment to the point that they got really, really sick because they didn't want to have to go to the hospital and deal with the, she, him, or people not wanting to take care of them. When I was in nursing school, I was assigned a patient, and my patient happened to be transgendered. It didn't have anything to do with why they were in the hospital. So it really was neither here nor there as far as what I was there to do. Of course, I used the appropriate pronouns for what they identified as, but then I had some classmates who were not assigned to this patient who took it upon themselves to kind of dig into things and look into things. And I I was adamant that, guys, we don't do this. This is a HIPAA violation. I reported it to the dean of students because this is not the kind of nurses that we need to be turning out if they're in school and they're already not following the protocol. We're here to take care of everybody regardless of anything. And if you can't feel safe when your health is on the line, then we have serious issues. So seeing that flag flying at a hospital made me feel like we had made some real strides. And that is why it's important, especially within a religious community too. I don't know what I would do if the Catholics flew a pride flag. I know it'll never happen, or at least not yet. But if you have people out there in the community who are scared or looking for some place where they can feel safe, that is an indication that they can feel safe. And that's why it's important, in my opinion, to fly the flag.
Thank you, Ms. Mikey. And now another question that was kind of generally addressed to everybody is, how did you know, or your family member express to you that they knew that they are trans or gay, and it was not just kind of a phase or not a different feeling? So perhaps this one, if Rabbi Robbie and Miss Ellen would like to answer, because they were mentioning kind of how they thought it would be, how they thought it could be a passing thing.
It's interesting because building upon that, I had some friends who were not so supportive, who would say to me, you really shouldn't tell people. Robbie's a rabbi, you really shouldn't tell people. So they were concerned that when Joshua figured it out a few years later, meaning that he stopped going through that phase, from their perspective, that, we would have damaged things by saying it. But from the moment he said it, he always spoke with such a certainty. And our questions were really about whether he could know because he was so young. I think had he come out older, we might not have questioned it as much, but we were questioning at the time, can a 10-year-old really know? But Remy, I loved how you spoke about how your parents didn't put that on you. And it just reaffirmed, like, we did the right thing, because I always like to hear we did the right thing. Who doesn't want to hear they did the right thing? That was really our big question, because he always knew. He knew, and he spoke with such conviction. And so for us, it was really, it was us 100% accepting that he knew at that age. So while we didn't believe, it's not a sense that we didn't believe him, but it was more that we were questioning, can he really know at 10? Is that possible that he knows at 10? Or is he, possibly copying what he's seeing from other people in our lives? And he just was always so firm with, this is who I am, this is what I like. And I'll never forget one of the things he said to me that it just spoke to me. He said to me, you're putting your children to bed at night and they say things as you're putting them to bed. And one night he said something to me about the idea that when looking at a certain boy, it gave him butterflies. And I remembered all of a sudden I transported back to being a little girl, and when I would have a crush on a little boy. And I remember us talking about it later on, that, we understood that aspect, that when you're in elementary school and you see someone and you like them and you have that butterfly feeling, and that he was able to articulate that, and that it was boys who gave him that butterfly feeling. So for us, that was when we were like, yeah, no, he knows. He really knows who he is. And so is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to add that that sense of like not knowing on our part as parents, as Remy was hoping that parents would do, that was very much what our thinking was like, we wanted to keep the door open. Like, that was our thing. We wanted Joshua to keep on knowing that we supported him wherever his journey was going to take him. If he was going to come out as translator, we just wanted him to know that, like, we're there for him. And as Maria said, like, there are certain dreams and hopes and ideas that we as parents have. And through us, our journey, we're going to have ups and we're going to have downs. And part of that struggle might be putting to bed certain dreams that we might have. But that's not putting the child to bed. It's the dream or the hope or the aspiration that we might have, because just like any other dream. You might dream that your child's going to become a doctor. All right, you finally realize, all right, the child's not going to become a doctor. All right, fine. And there's a little bit of upsetting behind that, but yet you then learn what the child is bringing to the table with this new aspect of their identity that they're informing you about. And it's great. And we just kind of go along for the ride, but not sort of burden the child with our own struggles. But I'm also, you know, I'm okay with letting Joshua know, like, you know, when we might, you know, pronouns was always a big thing, not necessarily with him, but with his friends and everything like that. And this was, you know, a journey for us, and we wanted him to know that we're not always perfect, and that you know, we're hoping that he'll understand as we go on that journey, in supporting him and his friends.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Does anybody else have anything else to add to that particular question?
I can add a little something. I think that it is important to add that I did not have a singular moment where I knew that I was like part of the LGBT community. It was a bit of a trial and error period for me. I identified as many different things. I have been LGBT and Q. And I think that although like those things didn't end up being where I have sort of settled, those things felt very real to me at the time. And those things were very real to me at the time. And even if I think that one big takeaway should be that even if this isn't who someone is for the rest of their lives, you need to meet them where they're at. And it is just as important to accept them where they're feeling right now as it would be like if this is who they are for the next 50 years. I might not identify as bisexual anymore, for example, but it was still incredibly important to me that people were supportive to me then as it is now.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Does anyone else have something to say? All right. Now that seems to be all the questions that we have for tonight. So thank you so much for everyone for coming. Thank you so much to all of our wonderful speakers. We really did learn so much from your presentations and your thoughts. And I hope that you enjoyed and that you'll join us for our next seminar, which is going to be, hold on, calendar. It's May 22nd at 6:30 on Zoom. And it's going to be about LGBTQ plus and religion, particularly the Episcopal Church, presented by Bishop Mary Glasspool of the Episcopal Diocese of New York.
So
and
just
just
a quick,
another thank you to everybody.
thank you, Julia, and just a quick thank you to all of our panelists. I'm sure others feel the same, but just speaking for myself, I am deeply moved by your vulnerability, your honesty, your sharing, your experience, your life experience. And we all know that this is the kind of thing that changes hearts and changes minds. And so one of the unspoken things in the room is that we all know, sadly, that religion can be a source of oppression and not liberation and affirmation for LGBTQ plus persons. And so I know with my colleague and my friend, Rabbi Robbie, in the Reformed tradition and the Episcopal Church, our two traditions have really worked very hard to understand and to be more open and affirming places that not just welcome, but also marry and also ordain LGBTQ plus persons. And so we're proud of that. And we're proud of the fact that we could listen to folks that were trying to help us to hear in our midst for a long time. And that's what y'all have done for us here. These are recorded sessions that we believe will be shared, and they're wonderful. And I would invite all y'all, as Julia just said, to come back to our last Educate Validate session before we have our parish-wide vote on flying the pride flag every June. Bishop Mary Glasspool is one of the first lesbian bishops in the history of Christendom. And so we're blessed to have her as one of our 3 bishops here in New York. And she's going to sort of thread the needle and talk about how is it that the Episcopal Church in its theology and its understanding of the Bible comes to a place where we feel this is in complete harmony with the teachings of Jesus, the Bible, and how we as Episcopalians understand the faith. So please consider joining us, because it will be a very unique conversation with a wonderful person who's been partnered with her wife for over 30 years. On that, I think we're time to go, and thank you again, everyone, for everything. And how about a round of applause for Julia, who's doing such a great job, along with Chris and Faye, our administrators and bouncers behind the scenes. So thank you one and all, and hope you have a good evening. Thanks for being with us. Hope to see you.
Good job,
Julia.
Great day. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Julia rocks.
Thank you, everyone. It was wonderful being with you. Thank you, Julia.